My tight end fantasy football rankings are here for the 2021 season. It feels good to say that. Now, if you haven't watched my previous videos, we talked about wide receivers. We talked about that earlier today. Go check out that video. We talked about QBs and running backs yesterday, so go check out those videos. All will be linked down below. And at the end of the video, today we're talking about my top 25 tight ends. Now, a lot of you out there play in standard leagues, playing PPR leagues. Today, I'm kind of mushing them together. I'm going to just say half PPR leagues because, like I said, a lot of people play in those other leagues, but half PPR seems like an even playing ground. Now, it's not really going to change if you're in a PPR or a standard league how I feel about any of these guys. You see the tight end position, not very deep. So if you can't go one of those top three guys, which we'll get into them in a second, then, you're basically grasping at straws trying to pick between PPR and whatever. So we'll get into it. Now, I do have to remind you guys, injuries are a thing, and while the tight end position is a weird one, still injuries happen to this position, and it already has happened with Irv Smith Jr. going down. So you'll see that reflected in my rankings. Now, if you don't want to watch the whole video, I'll have my rankings down below, and you can check them out. Now, I do have to say, quick shout out. First ever podcast coming tomorrow. Not first ever, first one of the season. First podcast coming tomorrow. So make sure you check out that video. You'll see it. It's going to be a long one, but it's a good listen. I guarantee you that. We haven't recorded it, but you'll like what you see. Now let's get into it. Start number 25. Not going to spend a lot of time on these. Hayden Hurst, backup for Kyle Pitts now. I think he'll have some fantasy useful weeks, but he's going to be touchdown dependent. Zach Ertz, a weird one. What's going to happen with Zach Ertz? Probably could be higher, honestly, but it's hard to really even say. I mean, he's one of the best tight ends in fantasy football. Had a weird year last year, but I'll give him 24 because I don't know what his situation is. Kmet, a lot of people high on him. I think he suffered an injury or something along those lines, but Kmet will be good for the Bears. But like I said, you're not starting him. Now you got O.J. Howard for the Buccaneers. Something happens to maybe Rob Gronkowski. Maybe he'll slide up higher. Gerald Everett, I think, will be a slept-on tight end here. I think he'll be very good in fantasy football. Has moved on from the Rams, the division rival, the Seahawks, going with their offensive coordinator there, or one of their coordinators. Don't mind taking him. Now, obviously, you probably won't be taking him, Gerald Everett, but I think he'll be useful and probably be on my DFS lineups because I like to go cheap at the tight end position. Moving on to top 20, Pat Freiermuth. If Eric Ebron gets the heck out of town in Pittsburgh, then Pat Freiermuth will be pretty good. Irv Smith Jr. was one of my favorite tight ends off the board, but he obviously suffered an injury. Will miss the first couple weeks of the season, I believe. Hate to see that. He slid probably 5-6 picks after that injury news came out. Hunter Henry signed a big deal for the New England Patriots. He's obviously with Jonnu Smith, who we'll talk about in a second. Now, Hunter Henry, he is what he is. He's very injury prone. At least that's what he has been in his whole NFL career. Don't mind taking him. I mean, you're not going to be taking him. Let's be honest. You're not taking Hunter Henry. Evan Engram. Now, Evan Engram probably was this the lowest he's ever been in his NFL career in terms of fantasy football rankings. I'm out on this Daniel Jones-led New York Giants offense. Maybe they'll be better than people think, than maybe I think, but not really going to be trusting him. You got the Giants. They got so many receivers out there. Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, obviously Saquon Barkley, Kadarius Toney, Darius Slay, and all these guys. I don't know what to do with Daniel Jones in this offense. I'm out. Jared Cook. Austin Eckler loves Jared Cook. Said he was a fantasy football sleeper. So sure, that's why he gets to number 16. Because I'll trust Eckler. I think Jared Cook, he's been good in fantasy football. Just kind of annoying to have on your team. But he's being drafted as the tight end 16 off the board. So what are you even investing at that rate? Eric Ebron, touchdown dependent guy, just like all the guys below him. Eric Ebron, he is what he is. He's going to score touchdowns, but it's just going to be annoying. If he doesn't score a touchdown, it'll be useless. Austin Hooper, great first name, but he's another touchdown-dependent guy. Mike Gesicki will have more, fantasy-relevant weeks than the guys below him, but he's still on a Dolphins team with Jalen Waddle, Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, and obviously with Myles Gaskin and the running backs too. It's kind of hard to see him getting a lot of work, a lot of targets per week, but when he does get it, maybe some injuries happen, hopefully not, at least for the player's sake. Mike Gesicki, he was useful in fantasy football last year, but very up and down, very roller coaster type season in fantasy, but he'll still be decent. Tyler Higbee, still on the Rams, and he's now the only tight end there. Gerald Everett, like I said, with the Seahawks. Tyler Higbee will be pretty decent this year in fantasy football, but it's whether or not, it's another tight end. He's 12th off the board, probably my last tight end, That's just what happens in fantasy football. Tight end is a weird position, and that's why you see Tyler Higbee here. You probably might not have ever heard of him. Now in my top 11, Rob Gronkowski. He's going to be touchdown dependent. He'll have more weeks than these guys below him. I do like Rob Gronkowski. He's been a tight end legend, one of the best ever to play the game. Rob Gronkowski will have some very fantasy-friendly weeks this year in fantasy football. He's the top 11 tight end. So if you can get him, if you're never drafting a tight end and he's your tight end you draft, don't mind him. Jonnu Smith, one of the most athletic tight ends on this whole list. I do think he'll have a good fantasy football year, just whether or not how much he gets used with the Patriots. I think he's being slept on. You could take him probably. I wouldn't even mind taking him over Noah Fant or Dallas Goedert. either, or even Robert Tonyan. I don't mind him, but it's just about the targets. Cam Newton, he throws lasers. Who knows who he's throwing to? Mac Jones is out there. I guarantee you Jonnu Smith will do better. Dallas Goedert, Noah Fant, Robert Tonyan. You could switch all these three guys. Robert Tonyan, great rookie year. I believe it was a rookie. I don't know what year he was in last year, but he had a very good season in terms of fantasy football last year. And for real life football, he was very good for the Green Bay Packers. Now, well, he was pretty touchdown dependent towards the end of the year. Noah Fant, fantastic for Logan. I did that for you out there. Now, it's Noah Fant. You got KJ Hamler, you got Cortland Sutton, and you got obviously Jerry Jeudy, and then you got the running backs, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, and you got Noah Fant in there. Now, will this Broncos offense be crazy good? I don't know. You're led by Teddy Bridgewater and probably eventually Drew Lock. I don't know. Dallas Goedert, I think will be very good in fantasy football, but Jalen Hurts don't really know how good of a fantasy or real life QB he will be. Now, he had some games where he threw for a lot of yards, but no one really on the team really succeeded in terms of having big games. Dallas Goedert will be a good, safe, reliable target, but who knows what's happening with Zach Ertz either. If this is Dallas Goedert's show and he's just the only one out there, don't mind taking him as the top 8 tight end in the NFL. Moving on to my top 6, and these are the guys, if you can, I would try to get them because there's a big difference between the top 6 and the guys below him. Logan Thomas, especially in PPR leagues, this guy will be a beast. Ryan Fitzpatrick will be targeting him. He's very good, and he was running a lot of short routes last year. I think he'll be kind of expanding that route tree, going a little bit deeper than people might see. I might think he can do. He got paid this offseason too, so props to him. I think I'll have a good fantasy football season. I'm in on Logan Thomas if I can get him. Moving on, top 5, TJ Hockenson for the Detroit Lions. You could switch him and Logan Thomas. I wouldn't be really all too mad, but you think about it, I'm in. I think I could do it. I could do TJ Hockenson. I could do him. Now, I gotta say, I've realized I've missed Kyle Pitts, so I'm gonna put Kyle Pitts right here at number 5. So actually, TJ Hockenson will be my number 6 tight end, and the guys below him will all go down a different spot. But TJ Hockenson, he is what he is. I think he'll have a very good fantasy football season, but how good that will be, I don't really know. He's a Detroit Lion. Now, number 5, who apparently, when I'm recording this, I forgot to put him on there. Kyle Pitts could be one of the best tight ends in NFL. And has rookie tight ends in NFL history, and I think he will live up to the hype. Some people are higher on him, or either low on him. I'm high on him. I think he's a freakish talent, freakish athlete, and I think he'll have a very good fantasy QB. You got Matt Ryan, who's a good real life QB. They'll be looking for Kyle Pitts. They want to make people see, this guy was worth this pick. They don't want him to have a bad rookie season. Kyle Pitts, legit, very talented. I'm in. If you can get him, TJ. If you can get Kyle Pitts at your fifth tight end off the board. Number 4, Mark Andrews. Love him, and every single receiver on the Ravens is injured on their first drive, which was the only drive with Lamar Jackson. He had a couple nice completions to Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, top 4 tight end. There's no way around that. He's going to be very good in fantasy football again this year. Probably score a lot of touchdowns because they already lost J.K. Dobbins, lost every single receiver basically they got. Yeah, it's going to be Mark Andrews, and that's about it. That's all Lamar Jackson has to throw to. Now I'm at top 3, which I think there's a big gap between 3 and a big gap between 2 and 3 in my opinion. George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in NFL history. He had very good fantasy football seasons 2 years ago. Now, last year he was injured prone. He was injured, not his fault necessarily too much. I think he'll be a little more conservative, trying to truck people all over the place. But it's George Kittle. He's going to be top 3 tight end, whether or not you like it or not, as long as he can stay healthy. Now, Darren Waller and Travis Kelce, number 1 and number 2. I think there's a big difference between these guys and maybe George Kittle. Bigger than they are getting drafted. Darren Waller is going to have a much higher target share than George Kittle. It's going to be on a worse team than George Kittle. So a lot more garbage time fantasy points for Darren Waller. We know Derek Carr loves him in the red zone. And while he likes to get tackled on the 1, I do think he'll score a lot more touchdowns. And I think he's going to have more fantasy production than George Kittle just because there's not as many mouths to feed. You think about the Raiders, don't have a lot of weapons out there. They got Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards, John Brown, Willie Snead. None of those guys scare me that much. George Kittle, he's got to compete with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel on a team that likes to run the ball. I like Darren Waller a lot more than George Kittle this year, especially at their ADP going about 1 or 2 picks in between. Travis Kelce, bona fide. He's been in the top 5. I think he's been the number 1 tight end for 5 straight years, 1,000 yards in 5 straight years. Money in the bank, as Field Yates always says. This guy's legit. He's awesome. Love to watch him. He's playing with Patrick Mahomes. If no injuries happen and maybe he grows back the beard, guaranteed tight end 1. He's money in the bank. So if you can take him, he's going to be going in the first round. Maybe if you're in the back half of the first round and you can snag him, don't mind him. He gives you that much of a value over the rest of the tight ends. Even Darren Waller, he'll give you a big value. You'll be starting with a 6-7 point handicap on basically everyone else in the league, just at the tight end position. That's how good Travis Kelce is. Those are my top 25 tight ends. A little scuffed since Kyle Pitts was left out of it, but Kyle Pitts will be added right in at number 5. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. This has been Austin. We got a lot more fun videos. Like I said, podcast is coming out tomorrow, so make sure you check that video out. This has been Austin. I'll catch you guys again then. Peace out.